From the studios of the Pemberton Township Board of Education's Channel 14, it's time to find out what's cooking. Here now is the head of the Food Services Department at Pemberton Township High School and your host, Tim Paroli.
Hello, welcome again to What's Cooking. I'm Tim Paroli, and today we're going to show you how to make roast beef. Sure, you have it all the time. When more than the usual number of people show up, you might be in a panic. Maybe you've never tried to roast a beef yourself because as you walk down the counter of the meat store, you look and you're not sure what to purchase. Well, today we're going to take you step by step, what to buy, what to do with it. Then we're going to show you how to make a nice starch to go with it. That's a Yorkshire pudding. Very easy. We're going to cook that at the same time that we cook the roast of beef. So we're going to explain all that to you, how to prepare it. What we're going to do is start out by telling you a little bit about roasting, what it is, how it happens, and once you know what's going on, you're going to know how to prepare. We're going to roast for you today some potatoes and some carrots and a couple onions, and we're going to show you how to prepare a roast of beef. Now what I have for you today, highly overrated, but very popular with many people. And the reason that this roast is so popular is because it is probably, number one, easiest to identify. Number two, it's very easy to tell where it is, and its uniform shape and size, roast after roast, make it very popular. Other than that, it's a very tough cut of beef. It has somewhat a decent flavor to it, but it is nowhere near what other roasts and other cuts of beef can have. What we're talking about today is an eye round. And you might say, gee, I make eye round all the time. And if you do and you like it and the way you prepare it is fine, wonderful. Once we show you how to prepare this, you will want to try other roasts of beef. The eye round is very popular because if you look at the eye round, just the way we have it, and this is 1/2 of an eye round, what you'll notice is that, number one, it doesn't have much fat on it. It's got a little layer of fat on the side here. If you notice, it's right there, and that's only on 1/3 of it. The fat's here. The rest of this has no fat. Its shape is very symmetry, and you see that it's all the same, all right? We can look at where it's cut, and you can notice that it's got a grain to it, sort of like a block of wood. And that's going to be important to remember as we slice it. And if you look at it the way it will be roasted, you can see the lines in the muscles all going this way. And when we are going to slice a roast of beef, when we show this to you later, we're going to cut it opposite the way it grows. So the muscles are growing this way, we are going to cut it this way. And you'll see that it's just bands of muscle fibers, and that's all that it is. It's kind of a tough muscle. It does a lot of the work for the leg of the cow. So that's one reason why it's tough. The other reason why this can be kind of tough is if we look at this section of the roast right here, you will notice that throughout the section where it is nice and red, there's no dots of white in there. There's no marbling. It's got a little bit of a nerve running through here. Now that's not what we're after. That will be kind of tough. That's a beautiful shot right there. If you notice the couple flecks of white that I'm pointing out to you, it should have more in there to be more tender. And you'll notice how you can see the ripples on it the way it's cut from being cross-cut. That lets us know that this is going to be kind of a tough roast. But with all that going against it, it is still very popular because when this end is done, this end is done. So it's kind of hard to ruin. So it's a good one for you to start with if you've never roasted beef before. However, if it's a little bit tough when you're done, remember I told you that at the top of the program. What we're going to do is get the beef ready first. Now I'm putting it in a roasting pan and I'm putting it with the fat side down. That may be contrary to a lot of the ways you've been taught to cook. A lot of people like to put them with the fat side facing up and they want the fat to baste over the meat and go through the roast. However, that's not going to happen. You can put all the fat you want over the outside of this roast and it's never going to get in and flavor it. If the fat is not inside the muscles like we showed you, there's not going to be that much flavor. So if anything is going to stick to the pan, I'll let the fat stick to the pan. So it's fat side down for me. Then we're going to season this, since I told you that it is only moderate in its flavor. So we're going to season that with some salt. And we're going to season with some black pepper. All right, now I'm putting enough on there so that you at home can see it. And you should be able to see it. When you first look at that, it should appear to be a lot on there. I'm going to put on a little bit of granulated garlic. Now that goes all over the top of it. And I'm even going to add to this a little bit of powdered garlic, which I like even better. The powdered garlic will stick wherever it touches. You can see it, and it is a little stronger, and when we make a sauce, we won't have any little bits of garlic floating around in there. So for the beef, it's fat side down, salt, pepper, and garlic. And then we're going to roast some vegetables. What we have are some baking potatoes. And we take the baking potatoes, and since this is an eye round and it's so small, we're going to just cut those potatoes, quarter them, and into the pan they'll go. Now, we cut them in half, we lay them on the flat side so they don't rock around, and we cut them into strips. And in they go. We're going to take the carrot, we're going to trim the ends off the carrot, and we're going to cut these so that they are similar in shape, but a little smaller than the potatoes, because we want these to roast at the same rate of time that the potatoes are going to roast. So we cut the ends, and we make them just a little smaller than the potato. If you have one end of a carrot that is a lot larger, what you can do with that, after I throw these out of the way, is you take that carrot and you set the knife on the carrot and then just give it a little tap with your hand like that. Even if you don't cut it exactly even, it won't matter. As long as you have a flat side, you can lay that carrot over now and it'll cut real nice. So there's our vegetables in there. And then we're going to clean up an onion, and that's going to go in with the roast. This is a very nice way to prepare a meal if you're not going to be around. What I mean is you're not going to be there either to watch it cook, or you're not going to be there when it comes out of the oven. You can have an entire roast in the oven and ready to go, and you're going to have your potato and your vegetables all in there. Now the person taking it out, the only thing they have to know is how to make the sauce. Gee, and if that's you and you're watching our program, that's pretty good. So we've got that all ready to go into the oven. And all we're going to do now is put a little bit of olive oil across the top of the vegetables, just like that. And that's going to protect them since we're roasting them. I told you at the top of the program we were going to talk about how and what roasting is. And I want you to remember that whenever you hear anything that is going to be roasted, remember that it is going to be a very dry heat. It's going to be around 300 and 350 degrees. So we're going to put this in there, and we're going to let the dry heat work its way through all of the vegetables and all of the roast. Now, since we have an idea of the temperature, and this is, by commercial standards, a very small roast, what we want to do is once that roast begins to pick up color and it gets a nice brown color to it, then we can take that and put a little tent of foil over top of it. And that will stop the browning process, and it will just continue to cook without picking up any further color. So we don't have to worry about changing the oven temperature. We're only going to worry about cooking the roast till it's done. And something I want you to do before you put this in the oven is press on that roast and get a feel for what that feels like. You're going to push on it, and it'll give you an idea what a raw roast feels like. Once we know, when I tell you that we take out another roast and we feel the difference in it, then you'll know. So what we're going to do is, I have the other half of this that I have roasted in our oven, and we're going to bring that out right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn our oven up to 400 degrees. Now, this is what it looks like when it comes out of the oven. It has the same kind of a shape to it, and with the two of them here, you can see how dark that looks. Also, when we push down on this, this is going to have a firmer feel to it. Another way that you can check to make sure your roast is done, other than by the time, is when you think your roast is ready, you can put a fork into it, since it's a little roast, and pull it out, and you'll be able to tell by the color of the juices that come out. If the juices come out very, very red, then you know that the roast is rare. If the juice comes out like this one, just a little bit clear coming out, we know that this one is going to be medium to well. And if you're concerned about the safety in cooking beef, we're going to teach you a little bit about that today. One of the problems that we have in preparing roast beef is making sure that it is not only good and tasty, but that it's safe. So we want to make sure that our roast is cooked well enough to make sure that it's safe to eat. If you're eating rare beef and rare steaks, you're taking in this country anyway, you're taking a calculated risk on how well it's been inspected and how well the commercial people have prepared the beef for you. So if you don't want to take a chance, you cook your beef till it's medium. If you have a thermometer, you can take an internal temperature of over 160 degrees, and that'll assure you that you've got a well-done piece of beef. Now, after it's cooked, what I want you to do is take the beef out and let it rest. So I'm going over here to grab a couple of pans because we're going to take that whole roast pan apart for you now. What I have are pans. I use little pie pans because it's very easy to keep these foods hot in the oven. So we've got our potatoes. All right. And we're going to take out the carrot also that's roasted. And you're going to see all that's left in the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to separate all of this, and we're going to show you what to do with our roast and how to make that Yorkshire pudding right after this.
So, whose influence are you under?
Welcome back to our roast beef show. What I've got is an empty pan. However, it's not really empty because if you take a look in here, you'll see that we've got a lot of things caramelized in there from the beef drippings and some of the onion. And we're going to wait till we're just about ready because we're going to show you how to make a pan gravy there. What I've got out over here are the roasted vegetables that were roasted at the same time that our half of eye round was roasted. And we're letting that rest. If you look down at it, it's already got some juice starting to run out of it. What happens is we're driving heat from the outside of the roast in, and that pushes all the juices into the center of the roast. And then you let that roast set for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and if you can leave that roast for 20 minutes, then slice it. We're going to show you how nice it looks. Now, over in the oven, while we were on commercial, I put in a muffin pan, and I've got 6 little spots there. I don't know how many we're going to fill, but what I'm doing is letting that warm up. I've turned the oven all the way up. You can use a pie dish. You can use a small cake pan. It does not have to be the muffin pan for the pudding. However, it's just a nice starch that's going to go with it. So what we need for Yorkshire pudding is some flour, some eggs, some milk, and I've got all those here, and we even wrote it down for you. So what we're going to do is begin by breaking 3 eggs, and we're going to beat them well. And this is important because Yorkshire pudding is basically a type of custard. So whenever we make a custard, whenever you hear that we're going to use eggs and milk together, make sure that you take the eggs after you've cracked the eggs and that you beat them very well. So we're going to beat them up. If you don't, I don't want to talk while I'm whipping here, what will happen is that you will have little bits of yellow egg floating all around in there, and you don't want to have that. So we whip that real good. Now this can be flavored. What I'm giving you is a nice basic Yorkshire pudding. It's a very basic, easy thing to put together, but we're going to add a couple things to that to flavor that. The old Yorkshire pudding was 2 cups of flour. You would half that with a little cornstarch if you were trying to cut down on it a little bit, or if you wanted to adjust the consistency. It would be 2 cups of whole milk, some salt, and 3 eggs. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix that eggs and milk right there. And we're going to put a pinch of nutmeg in here because the old style Yorkshire pudding called for about a cup of melted butter that you'd add to that. Sounds good to me. And then you would add another cup of beef fat, and you'd whip that into that. So this thing was just loaded with fat. We're not going to put all that in here today. However, we're going to make it so it's tasty. So I put in, to compensate for the amount of flavor that's not going to be in there, we're adding a generous pinch of pepper. We're adding a pinch of nutmeg, which will give it a different taste that may be hard to recognize at first. And I'm going to reach, but not with my hands, we're going to reach into the cayenne and put a little cayenne pepper in here. So this is going to have a little bit of a zing to it. Now, once we have that set, I'm going to add, instead of melted butter to that, a little bit of oil. Olive oil, a little better than the beef fat. It's going to smooth that out. And then we're going to add our flour to this. And that we're going to mix till we get that nice and smooth, and then we're going to mix it one more time as I add the second half to it. It's easier to mix this, and I'm just using an all-purpose flour in here. There we go. We'll put the other half to it. And we'll get the consistency of that real nice. And we want that nice and smooth. And then I'm going to shake a little salt into this. Now, any of these you can omit, or you can add or change any flavor you want to it. But remember this, you don't want this real salty. You don't want this too strong. And then if you make this kind of spicy, then you better make the sauce that goes with this a little on the flat side. You'd like them to be balanced. You don't want a real hot sauce with a real hot pudding here. Now we're going to shake this out of the whip. And then I'm almost done mixing this. So what I want to make sure is that my pan is going to be set. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to bring the oil over to the oven, and we're going to put in the bottom of each of those about 1/8 of an inch on the bottom of each cup. So into the oven, we're going to pull that out. And we're going to just enough to coat the bottoms of them. And as soon as this oil hits the bottom of those cups, it starts moving. So we know that's nice and hot. And we'll fill 5 of them. And I'm going to let that go because I want the oil now to be very hot. So we stir that up. And in just that little bit of time, since that pan is nice and hot, that heat will transfer from the pan right to the oil, and we're all ready to go. Now, while I go over and do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that pan a little shake, and that's going to swirl the oil all around the sides of the cup. So you're going to see me move the pan, then we're going to put our batter right into it. And this has to be done right near the oven. And I'm going to fill these just under a half. And we're going to turn that around. And we're going to fill them. Now you can understand how the beef fat was used in place of oil. That would be the fat that you had and you would use it. But we now know better that we don't want too much fat. So a dish like this, just by not using beef fat in the oven, we have already knocked out a lot of the harmful fats that used to be in an old type dish. So we've done that, and we've gotten that into the oven, and we're all set. Now we're going to let that cook. What that will do is puff up. It might come over and fall. And you're saying, oh yeah, now I know what you're making. You're making popovers. So they're known by a lot of different terms, all in different parts of the country. What I want to do now is take our pan and put it over the fire. And we're going to do something that's called deglazing. In other words, we have built up a lot of drippings in the bottom of the pan, and we're going to deglaze that with a little bit of red wine. A little more red wine. There we go. And then we're going to put a little water in there. And I'm only putting in enough right now to cover what's there. I want to break up what's on the surface. And I want to just kind of scrape that all off. And this will turn that liquid very dark. So we don't have to color this. And right about now, the aroma coming out of this pan is enough to drive us all a little bit crazy. It's going to put a nice smell throughout the kitchen in the house. And you'll have everybody, by the time you're doing your pan gravy, everybody's going to be ready for dinner. So we're all set. Everything is staged and ready to go. Now, I don't have so much liquid in here yet because I want to be able to see what I'm doing, making sure that we're scraping all of that off so that we don't leave any of that in the bottom of the pan. Now, I've got that all out of the way. Take my dirty little whip there and spin that around. And we've got that all set. So we stir that around. Now I can add a little more water to that till we get the amount that we're looking for here. Now, how do you decide how much gravy you're going to need? You determine that by the size of the roast and by the size of the pan. We'll determine that. This can also be used for a soup later on. However, it would be a little cloudy, not like a stock like you've seen on previous shows. So we've got that stirred up, and we're going to let that come up to a boil. But we have to taste that to see how we are flavor-wise, because this is going to be the base for our pan gravy. Don't be shocked the first time you taste that because it's very flat. Remember, all the seasoning is on the beef. None of it went in other than the drippings and the color. So we're going to put some salt in here. And what you can do the first time you make this is you won't put the salt to it like I have. You might want to put some salt in it and then taste it. Give it a minute or two to dissolve the salt completely. And now some pepper. And we'll stir that around. And you can see this is beginning to steam now, so this is just about ready to come to a boil. Now, we can serve this a couple of ways. This can be thickened up, but if you're trying to keep an eye on what you're eating, then you could serve this just the way it is, and that would be just the juice to go with it. But you can also take and thicken this pan gravy. Now, there's a couple of ways to thicken a pan gravy. One is you can take a little bit of cold milk and you can dissolve any of the starches in it. A pan gravy traditionally was done one of two ways. You could take flour. If there was a lot of fat in the pan and not much liquid, you could take that flour, mix it in with the fat, and then add your water to it. But if the pan didn't have a lot of fat, you would bring it to a boil like we have now, and stir your thickener in with a cold liquid. We're going to put a little more in there. And this is perfectly fine for a nice, quick sauce. We're going to stir that up. The trick to this is to make sure that the liquid you're using to dissolve your starches is cold. Once that's nice and cold, it'll make it nice and smooth. Don't be too impatient to throw it into your gravy. Stir that around and get that nice and smooth. Once you have that nice and smooth, we have the whip that'll work out real nice. Give that a little stir there. This is boiling very nicely, and that's what I wanted it to do. And we're going to stir that right into the center of the whip. And we got all our slices of onion now have come right back. There we go. So we've got all our nice bits and pieces in there from the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to just stir this till it returns to a boil. We'll taste that. So I'm waiting. There it goes. It's just coming to a boil now. And we've got that seasoning down just right. So we can shut that off. Now we take our roast. And you haven't seen me stick this but one time. You don't want to stick the roast because if you stick it, especially when it's hot, all the juice that we saved in there is all going to come out. And it's going to run out and go all over the place. So we don't want that to happen. And because we let the roast rest a little bit, we can now take that and slice that roast. And remember I told you how we drove all the juices in to the center of the roast? Well, now, by letting this rest, you can see that there's a very thin outside, and the rest of that has a very nice, perfect color all the way around it. We don't have any odd color, like no big dark brown edge with a tiny little spot in the center. So we're going to put our beef right there, and our turnovers or our puddings are ready. We're going to lift them out. We're going to slide one of these right out and on there, just like that. A couple of our vegetables, and our sauce goes over top. And you had a meal that went together in one pan. Nice and easy. And now you know how to make a roast beef with pan gravy. Thank you for watching.